All right, we are back on Top 25 Voter Pod with Chad Conine, John Werner. I'm Bryce Cherry. Gentlemen, good to see you guys.
Howdy.
Good, as always.
Yep. So let's talk some basketball. Baylor actually played a men's basketball game last night, Tuesday night, as we record this podcast. And you know, there was a little bit of a rust, you know, on the Bears, COVID related, maybe. They hadn't played in 3 weeks. Got off to a slow start, trailed by 17, and eventually came back and won that game, 77-72. So we've kind of talked about this before. We asked the question, would there be any rust? Was this not any big surprise?
I don't think so. I probably wouldn't have thought they'd play quite that bad at the start. The first 12 minutes, they made 9 turnovers. They started out 5 of 16. That's pretty bad. And they got down by 17 against the last place team in the Big 12.
But they haven't really even been practicing, have they?
No, they just came back Sunday. So, but still, getting down 17 against Iowa State, I didn't expect that. But they got it together. They made a nice rally. You know, it didn't help that they had a Jonathan Chama-Chachua out. I think I hadn't said that name in like 3 weeks since COVID started. So I'm sure that's probably not correct. But yeah, they got it together, and it was a big win. I mean, they're really set up to win the conference title now.
Chad, were you surprised by that score at all, or especially early on?
Not really. I mean, you know, for all the talk about how rusty Baylor was, you have to remember they didn't blow by Iowa State and Ames the way some teams have. So, you know, it might be a little bit of a matchup issue. You know, they were 8 for 25 from 3-point range, and so, you know, they showed that they might be human from beyond the arc. And you know, that 45%, I mean, if they shoot 45% from 3-point range for the entire season, I mean, just go ahead and call off the tournament and give them the trophy.
Golden State Warriors with Steph and Klay Thompson didn't shoot that over a season. Yeah, that's
right.
That you're right. That is the laws of averages maybe catching up with you a little bit. So Baylor, or the Big 12, also released its revamped schedule with some of the some of the postponed games that they needed to make up. And one of those reschedulings was canceling the Baylor West Virginia game on Thursday that was set for the Farrell Center in favor of the Bears traveling to Morgantown next week. Is that fair?
I thought it was pretty curious for that to happen. West Virginia has just played 2 straight road games against Texas and TCU. And probably Bob Huggins had some input. He probably didn't want to play a 3rd straight road game. And so West Virginia has 4 straight home games to end the regular season. Baylor's got 2 and 2. And those 2 road games are really tough, at Kansas and at West Virginia. And but the thing is, it would still be very hard for Baylor to not win the title. They have to win 1 game. That's it. And you know, they go by winning percentage, and you know, that would put Baylor in position to win the title with just 1 win. So, I mean, if they can't do that, they don't deserve it.
Chad, we know how you feel about Huggy Bear. You feel like he had some sway here?
Oh yeah. Yeah. You know, what I can't remember what year it was that they came into the conference. But sorry, I got incoming calls and incoming texts and everything today. But anyway, no, they came into the conference. I don't know. What was it, about 2012 or 2013?
Yeah, 12.
12. Yeah. Not long after that, I remember as a freelancer and just paying attention to what was going on, covering them a little bit and listening to some of his stuff. And he came in moaning and groaning about the time, the long road trips they had to make. And, Huggins is kind of like, he must be like really good and generous to people to kind of smooth the wheels too, because otherwise, why would people put up with this moaning and groaning all the time? And so, I'm sure he has lots of sway. He's a Hall of Famer, and he's won a lot of games and everything. But yeah, I think he throws his weight around quite a bit.
He's got some weight to throw around as well, but don't we all?
Yeah. No, he's kind of like that. He's kind of like that actor though that's never won an Oscar. What did they say? That statue starts winking at you, or no, you don't even have a statue, so never mind.
Right.
There's a line in the movie. I think one of the Ocean's 12, when Julia Roberts' assistant says to Bruce Willis, that statue starts smirking at you after a while. And the joke is that Bruce Willis doesn't have one of those statues.
Yeah. That's pretty good stuff.
Yeah.
So, well, this is kind of off the map question here, but is Huggins the best coach not to have a national championship out there?
Wow. Well, I'd say Mark Few would be right there. Got over an 800 winning percentage at Gonzaga. Yeah, I'd put Few right in there.
When you watch the teams you cover and the teams you pull for go through a conference season like this one, when the conference is so good, it just kind of makes you roll your eyes at Gonzaga and Mark Few a little bit, doesn't it?
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, because they've been a high seed before. Now I know a lot of years as Gonzaga was sort of building up to where it is now, they were that darling team, that Cinderella team, and
Right.
then they became a legit, national contender.
Yeah, I wrote a column last Sunday, the top 5 AP men's basketball teams, just kind of analyzing their strengths and potential weaknesses. And to me, Gonzaga's potential weakness is a weak conference schedule. And I just don't think they're used to playing really good teams night after night. And I think that eventually has bitten them in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. So getting back to the Big 12, if Baylor ends up winning the Big 12, which John mentioned that should happen, but the Bears only play 14 games, will that be looked at with a little less respect than if they had played 18?
I think people will wonder what would have happened in those other 4 games that were canceled. But at the same time, Baylor's going to end up playing 8 Big 12 road games and just 6 home games. So I don't think the schedule has really favored them. I mean, the schedule they ended up with has favored them.
They're not even going to get the Longhorns at home either, are they?
Right. Yeah. It's Texas, West Virginia, and TCU were the canceled home games. And the canceled road game was Oklahoma. So, I think they will be seen as deserving of the title, just because, the schedule hasn't been balanced for them. And, to fight through COVID and still win with all, with that factor, I think is still impressive.
Chad?
Well, I mean, you win a conference championship, you have the best winning percentage at the end of the year, congratulations, here's the conference championship. I don't think there's anything illegitimate about it. I mean, they can't help what games they got canceled, didn't get canceled. But this college basketball season, for one, it sucks. I mean, it sucks not to have the run up that you had in October in November and December that you normally have. And then to have holes in your schedule, you don't get to play games. You don't get to really develop your team the way you normally would because you don't have a schedule to rely on. And if you're not an experienced team like Baylor is, it's played together for a long time, it's real hard to get your guys on the same page. And on top of it, we're going to see some of the best players, Greg Brown and Cade Cunningham, come to mind real quickly, that, you know, play 25 games in their whole college career, and that's it. Bye-bye, you know, and it sucks. And the NCAA tournament, I hope it goes to completion without some of the best teams getting knocked out. But, you know, for a long time, as soon as the deal hit last year, I worried that this season would get messed up, and it has. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It just sucks. I mean, but at least they're playing games, but it sucks. By the way, going back to the last question, there are 6 NCAA Division I coaches with 600 or more wins, and Bob Huggins currently has 895, which that's a lot. The 5 in front of him are Roy Williams, Bob Knight, Jim Calhoun, Jim Boeheim, and Mike Krzyzewski. So that pretty much answers that question from before.
Good crew. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, to me, he's not ever been at a blue blood program where you might expect to try to win a national championship. I mean, West Virginia's solid and good, but you know, and then he was at Cincinnati. Where else has he been?
Kansas State for a year.
Kansas State, yeah. So to me, those kind of programs, I mean, he's done well to raise the specter of those programs while he's been there, but you're generally not going to win a national championship at a program like that. So, you know,
I mean, I think Cincinnati was.
That was a good program.
They were kind of a Villanova, Butler, Gonzaga type of blue blood, you know.
Yeah, that's fair.
Right. Yeah.
And they had Kenyon Martin, I think, while he was there.
Yeah.
So I mean, they had some guys.
And Nick the Quick. Don't forget Nick the Quick.
Nick the Quick. He was great. I saw him play live in the NBA one year when he was with the Lakers.
Yep.
So let's turn our attention to the women real quick. Chad's headed back to the Farrell Center tonight again as we record this podcast. Lady Bears, much like the men, you know, are in the driver's seat for a Big 12 championship, and it'll be the 8th jillionth year in a row that they've done that. So what's unusual though is that they're sitting here at number 7 in the AP poll. Some of the projections have them as a 3 seed. We're used to kind of seeing them as a 1 or a 2. As Chad, I think, pointed out in maybe his season preview story at the start of the year, they are still the reigning national champions.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, do they deserve to be ranked higher?
Well, I think being that they're number 7 in the AP and coaches polls, I think making them 3 seed is pretty unfair. I mean, first of all, they are the reigning national champion, you know, and okay, they're probably not a 1 seed. Their resume doesn't really qualify them for a 1 seed at this point, but I think it's, you know, out of respect, they ought to be a 2 seed. But I mean, here's the thing, their resume and the number of top 25 teams they've even played doesn't stack up with, you know, the SEC schools for one thing. And then Louisville and NC State and UConn, you know, have all played more top 25 teams. But, you know, how many teams in the country, and I would venture to guess 0 teams in the country, have, you know, a couple of starters and a reserve that played legit minutes on a national championship run.
Right. That's a good point.
Now, they don't seed based on that, I don't think, but why shouldn't they, you know?
John, Chad mentioned that, you know, Baylor might not have the top 25 wins that some of those SEC teams have. Is that where, you know, the Big 12 hurts the Lady Bears?
Oh, I think so. I think it's just the opposite of the men. I mean,
it is extremely top heavy.
Yes. You know, the men, they're going to have probably 7 teams in. It looks like Oklahoma State's going to get to play in it this year. But I don't think there's any question they're going to have 7 teams in the men's tournament. How many do you think the women will have, Chad?
I've seen 5.
Okay.
but I've got a question to pose to you guys because, I came back. In fact, tomorrow is my 2-year anniversary back at the Trib. And so you guys have been
Congrats.
watching the Lady Bears closer than I have, for all these years and 11 years of winning Big 12 championships and all the whole Mulkey era. But since Baylor has become dominant and since they've won 11 straight conference championships, or going for their 11th, I should say, I think they're probably going to win it. It's almost like they've destroyed the rest of the conference. There's been precious few times when even more than one Big 12 team made it past the first weekend of the tournament. Like,
Wow.
Baylor's made it past the first weekend of the tournament every year. But like, other than that, during their reign, there's probably only 4 or 5 individual teams and that have made it past that first weekend. Now there've been 1 or 2 times when a couple made it, but going back to 2012, I believe Oklahoma, the year that 2010 when they made it into the Final Four, and Oklahoma made it in the Final Four. They had 2 teams in the Final Four, but that's by far the best representation, and that was before Baylor started winning the conference every year. So this is kind of a long-winded question, as some of our TV folks are known for asking sometimes. But I mean, has the Lady Bears, for better or for worse, kind of destroyed the rest of the conference?
I'll tackle that question. I think yes, to a certain extent. They've kind of crushed the spirits of those other teams. Here's the way it works, okay? I mean, the Lady Bears have the best coach in the conference, one of the best in all of women's basketball. They recruit better than anyone else. And let's just stop right there for a second and say, in women's basketball, you get a few more scholarships than you do in men's, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is ironic because there's fewer great players.
Well, the top programs tend to monopolize all those great players.
Yeah.
And so you'll have a lot of them ending up at the Baylors and the UConns and the South Carolinas of the world, so Baylor, in doing that, then they've hurt the recruiting efforts of their conference rivals, which, I mean, is good for Baylor, but maybe not so great for the conference. And then, so they recruit better. They've got a better coach. Because they recruit better, they have better players. And then they work. They work. They don't just rest on their laurels. They get after it, and it leads to one extremely dominant team. Now, I still do think there's an indictment here of some of those other programs, the Sherry Cole Oklahoma program, Iowa State with Bill Finley. Somebody else needs to step up and be, a consistent contender to Baylor. Maybe it's Vic Schaefer and the Longhorns over these next few years. I mean, and because I've said this before, Gary Blair and the Aggies were that team for several years. They legitimately gave Baylor a fight.
They probably would still if they're in the league.
They probably would still. I mean, they have an excellent program.
They're ranked number 3 right now, and I believe I voted them number 2 this week.
I think Chad noted in a piece that the last Big 12 team to win the conference other than Baylor is another one that's gone, is Nebraska. So if you still had A&M, you still had Nebraska, maybe there would be a little bit more competition.
Well, and somehow Baylor went and got Kim Mulkey from La Tech, and she came in, and Marcia Sharp and Jody Conrad reached the end of their career and went on to do other things and retired or whatever you want to call it. And neither Texas nor Texas Tech have come anywhere close to where they were under those previous coaches.
Yeah.
Yeah. If Tom Stanton has a lasting legacy at Baylor, it is hiring Kim Mulkey. He's been put up before for the Texas Sports Hall of Fame, which no offense to Tom Stanton. I think he's a perfectly nice guy. But I don't think he rises to the level of Texas Sports Hall of Famer. That said, if he's got a feather in his cap, it's hiring Kim Mulkey. I mean, that was a pretty good hire. So good stuff. Well, we will reunite.
I got one more women's question to throw back at you guys. And this podcast may take some editing, but whatever, I noticed that Charlie Collier from Texas is the number one player in a lot of WNBA mock drafts. And Charlie Collier is a junior. Do you feel like the WNBA is trying to increase its credibility, or that women's basketball in general is trying to make itself more like the men's game by promoting coming out early to these players? And really, for what reason? It's not like they're going to $1 million or multi-million-dollar contracts.
Yeah, I think that's what you just said is the part that makes no sense. I mean, they actually have renegotiated their contract within the last year or two, and their salaries are better than they used to be, but they still operated in the red for years and years, and with the NBA kind of propping the WNBA up financially. And so truthfully, these college players can stay 4 years and have probably more of a national persona or recognition in college than they might in the WNBA. The WNBA has its fans, but it's just not covered on a national scale like women's college basketball is.
Yeah.
So it's a good question.
John, any thoughts?
To me, it makes no sense for women's basketball players to come out early. And like Bryce said, it's a much higher profile playing in the NCAA. Maybe the competition isn't quite as good, but I would think, the top level of women's basketball, college basketball, is pretty close maybe to the WNBA. I don't know. What do y'all think?
Oh, I think the WNBA is on a higher level. I mean, I think anytime you start trying to compare college to pro, because you'll see some idiot every year say, Alabama could beat the and whatever NFL team, and that's just moronic, honestly. I mean, the best players in the WNBA were all the best players on their college team. You got all Americans that are riding the bench in the WNBA. So
I'll make one more point, Bryce. I know you probably got a meeting to go to, but when you talk about the length of your potential career and your earning years as a basketball player, probably these women's players have an even smaller window than most men's players do. And that might be a devil's advocate for a reason why somebody like Charlie Collier or Sabrina Ionescu would go out early. Now, I don't like it because I love college basketball and I love sort of the scene and the electricity in the arena. And I think that's worth playing for, but nobody's offering me even, tens of dollars to play basketball. So
I tell you what, Chad, I'll buy you lunch if you come out and play at our noon game one day. How about that? It'll be your first pro contract.
Oh, geez.
Good stuff. Well, thanks, guys. And we will reunite again next week. And as Chad said, I do need to get out of here. So
sounds
okay.
Good.
Talk to you later.
Hey, Bryce.
Yeah.
Hey, we go. Let me do a brief, just, what we talked about. Baylor just needs one win. Maybe it could be a lead brief or something.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, that'd be good. Okay. Sounds good.
Sounds good. Thanks, buddy.
All right.
See ya.